So thank you and a very good afternoon to all the audience gathered here. So we've got a wealth of experience on this panel. I can count at least 130 to 150 years of experience in all collectively on this panel. And the topic that we have for today is cybersecurity at the crossroad, the evolving landscape. So I'm sure with this wealth of experience, we should be able to do justice to this topic today. But let's discuss what cybersecurity is. So cybersecurity is ideally a buzzword, the hot topic in practically and called out in every business discussion and every business decision that we make nowadays. Okay, so we have moved from with cybersecurity from it being an IT issue to a risk issue, and now we call it a business responsibility and a board responsibility. It's practically on the agenda of every board that I can think about. But to put cybersecurity into its real perspective, cybersecurity and the cyber attacks, the cyber threats that we face are not really individual, which could be something like a phishing or compromise on your credentials. It is not even corporate, because corporate could be the ransomwares, etc. It is also extended to state-sponsored attacks, etc. So it's become a state weapon in a way, and the recent AIMS attack is a prime example. And now it is also used as a tool in warfare, and Russia and Ukraine is a very good example of it. So this is just to give you a perspective of cybersecurity and the threat that we are facing nowadays. Nothing changes within the BFSI world. We have the same impact and we have the same influences within the BFSI world, because BFSI, all said and done, is the backbone of the economy of any country, any geography. Okay, so with that background, we will try to today evolve on the dangers of cybersecurity and try to see what are the effective solutions that we could look at within the BFSI space. We will also try to touch upon some of the latest next-gen technologies. Again, AI, ML, blockchains, these are buzzwords that we always hear, and we try to see what is their impact from a cybersecurity angle. Again, I'll come back to the audience. These are y'all all stalwarts of this industry, etc. So you have the know-how on most of it. But from a key takeaway perspective, what this panel will try to do today is to give you some sort of effective solutions of how to handle cybersecurity within your respective organizations in this really complicated and perilous digital world. Okay, but before I start off now with my discussion, I want to basically just share with the audience. I'll try to keep this conversation as interactive as possible. And for that, I will encourage and request the audience, if you have a query, a clarification, anytime during the course of our conversation, as we are going through the conversation, please do raise your hands and we'll try to take them on the spot so that it's fresh in everyone's memory. Or we will try to even accommodate a short Q&A, time permitting. Okay, and with that, I'll come to my first question for today. Okay, this is just helps me to look at the panelists a bit better. My first question would be to you, Prakash. If I look at this in this evolving world and the cybersecurity that we have, how do you think it has impacted the overall financial landscape? And more importantly, what is the major challenges that you think the BFSI sector faces in mitigating these challenges?
Thank you. So the BFSI is not only the industry which is impacted by the cyber attackers, but BFSI is more attacked by the cyber attacker because it impacts the economy of the nation. Just while I was coming from the airport, I was reading a news where it was said that RBI has told the parliamentary panel that ransomware has increased tremendously in the nation. Why ransomware is attacked? And typically, if you see the reports, ransomware is more rampant in BFSI sector. Why? Because BFSI has two things. It has money involved and it has data of the customer. And bank runs on trust. If a bank is impacted and if a customer account is siphoned off, the customer will lose trust on the organization. And the whole banking system will collapse because banks runs on totally trust. Second, if you see the attackers, it has tried to attack, by increasing the DDoS. If you can see that DDoS attacks has increased, ransomware has increased, phishing campaigns. If you see the ransomware, 63% of the overall ransomware starts from the phishing links. And why this phishing is increasing? Because user is the weakest link. We say that human is the weakest link. How much security solutions we deploy, but human always becomes the weakest link. So the attackers plays with the mindset of the weak users. They send a phishing link so that the users gets tricked off on the phishing links and shares the confidential data, be it account information, be it credentials of the systems. or it takes the system by using the previous escalations, so that the attacker can take control of the complete data of the organization. So that is why you can see that the attackers has increased their intensity, especially after the COVID. The attack has increased on, especially on the BFSI sector.
Sure. Thanks for that. So weakest link is human. Attacks have increased by primarily because of the effect of COVID. We've also seen new gen attacks. So we've now gone into the fifth gen in terms of attacks, etc., multi-sector across a range of technologies, starting with the networks, endpoints, right up to the cloud. Mr. Satya, I'll just come with a second opinion on you. Anything that you would want to add on what Mr. Prakash has already shared? What is the impact in the financial industry, and what do you think is the major challenges that you face in mitigating this?
Yeah, thank you. The financial, the attacks happening, it is having a fraud element also. Like what Prakash told, the human is the weakest link. In most of these campaigns, they will try to deal with the human psychology factor also. The criminals, cyber criminals, want to exploit the human mentality also, psychology also. They will be saying that some campaign like it's $1 available or something, some campaigns, and last date is this or something. They will try to attack you psychologically, and they will try to motivate you. And most of the attacks are happening with the credentials disclosures by the humans. They will induce you to disclose your own credentials, and they will do like what you said. The ACFE also suggested their studies also revealed the post-COVID the attacks have impacted because the financial growth, global growth, economic growth is having an impact because there are no employment and all. You will be surprised. Some of the Indians were hired. They have landed somewhere for an employment. They came to know that they were landed for cyber crimes. So cyber crimes become a profession, and psychological factors were induced. Banking sector is the most impacted, and the last 2-3 years the impact has done. And cyber criminals were at large. That's also there. Cyber criminals were at large. Whatever the legislation that is happened globally, like an FATF task force and all for AML and other AML and other violations, such kind of a robust framework for this cyber violations have not yet happened globally. The one example is back in India, 4 years, 5 years back, we had an incident with one of the cooperative banks in Pune. We could not get the money, trace of the money back. But whereas AML and your drug trafficking and all, globally, a lot of enforcement is there, and the grey listing and red listing and all, you are all aware. Those kind of things should come for this state-sponsored cyber attacks, so that it will be, and more cyber policing. Like in one of the meeting where my senior is also present, I asked DIG of Maharashtra, when 10 lakh rupees a banker lost, I will lodge an FIR and the money will be brought me back by the police. When 100 crores was lost through electronic channels in Pune Cooperative Bank, the police could not, despite their best effort, they could not get the money back. So the government side also more, this one should, concerted effort should happen. In some countries, unitedly they are doing. Recently, Israel, some 6-7 countries together, they are attacking this cyber attacks collectively. So this, under the pretext of G20 presidency, the government should take something more to arrest this menace.
Okay, so very well said, Mr. Satya. I picked up two main points that you brought about. Cyber crime is more organized than the officials who are supposed to stop it. So we have got an organized sector working versus sectors that work in silos, where we basically don't have coordination among governments, we don't have coordination among states, etc. So basically tackling these become a major challenge. I know Sunder wanted to come in. If you want to have a quick word.
Just wanted to add what Satya had mentioned. On the people front, we try simulation attacks. So we use some sites like Amazon, the different Amazon, and say there is a good offer and all that to test how many employees succumb to the clicking the links. We found that 46 to 47% click the links. Some out of curiosity, some wanted to grab the discount offers. And so the human element, despite we have tests that are done without which you will not get salary because you will not be able to mark your attendance. And there is every year annual reprisal, or there is a test done to ensure that they don't click links, etc. There are several mailers that have gone to employees. Despite all that, 46 to 47, then we need to call individually each of them and give a lesson.
Fair point. So basically, we may have all the tools, all the setups in place, but humans will always stay as the weakest link. Okay. I'll stay with you on the second question. So let's talk about it then. We talked about humans as the weakest link. We talked about cybersecurity as being a threat. Let's talk about what's available to us to counter this threat. So we talk about the next gen technologies, AI and ML, blockchain come to the mind. Again, but I call it a double-edged sword because these are business requirements. These are to drive business. They could help us, or they could go against us from a cybersecurity perspective. Where do you stand on that, Sunder? So, do you think that it's something that will complement it from a cybersecurity active, or these are threats to cybersecurity?
I think there are good tools available. Also, locking the data. If you incisively arrange the data in such a manner that if some mishap or some problem occurs, the loss isn't much. The data itself that goes away is not material. So if you lock clearly the processes, technologies, apps, and training to people, you could manage attacks. So it's more on managing incidents and incident prevention and detection again. I was privy to a ransomware attack in a group, and the group company got impacted 60% or something like that, 50 to 60, quite an heavy attack. The number of servers were gone, and we didn't pay the blackmail. So, but my company didn't get impacted. Just one server had a partial attack because we had made several patch management changes, feature changes in the softwares, the releases, the version control. And if you go on doing risk assessments and tackle the low risk, medium risk, and high risk and critical risk immediately, high risk immediately. So we do 4 kinds of changes. One is the VAPT attacks. We do that daily for all internet facing and then apps also. Then we do dimensional analysis of the dark web. And again, there are vulnerabilities that are thrown. Then we have audits. Again, there are vulnerabilities that are thrown. Then, of course, SIM correlation, and then correlation of all the logs. When you attack the vulnerabilities in this scenario, you actually reduce the propensity to get attacked.
Okay, great. Very well put. So, Prashant, I will throw the same question to you. Do you think it's a boon or a bane in terms of next gen technologies from a cybersecurity perspective? And I'll just supplement it. If you think it's a boon, how can you leverage the impact with cybersecurity?
No, I will just put, you can take as it is. Okay. But the only thing is that if you are not going to use it at the earliest, the attacker will start using it and then start attacking you. Okay, there is no other way. Okay, that AI ML, we need to learn, we need to understand the gaps, we need to understand the weak points because all the technologies are new, is not fully protected. We need to understand what is our risk appetite. We need to have our plan ready, how we are going to protect it, and we need to do it fast. Because before we start using it, attacker will start using it, and then it will become very difficult for us to protect. You take example that chat GPT and everything is coming on, people can ask simple questions that I would like to attack this particular institute. What are the different stages to do that? And it throws everything to you. Okay. So we just need to understand what answer it gives first, and then how we are going to protect that. So that is how I feel we have to do. And to add on what Satya told, regulatories are doing a fantastic work today. Okay. But only thing we need to just ensure that the guidelines given by them, we follow those things, and then regularly, we need to assess those things, whether those controls are working properly. Just by putting control will not become secure or something. We need to assess those controls regularly, whether they are working to its effective. If it is not, just fine tune it and move ahead. That is the only way we can go ahead. But
Great.
we should be very fast to adopt the new technology.
Well put. So the early bird gets the worm, and a one-time implementation not enough. It's a continuous monitoring and assessment. Okay. With that, I'll just pause. Anyone in the audience? We basically covered 2 points. We've just assessed and said humans being the weakest link. Next gen technologies can be used, can be a boon rather than a bane, and it's something that we need to basically get early at, and we need to be continuously monitoring. Okay. So I'll come to you then, Yogesh, with my next question. So we talked about 2 aspects on the cybersecurity, and when we talk about cybersecurity, we always come to a point of data security and data privacy. So I want your view on these 2 aspects with the upcoming DPDP Act, which is the Digital Personal Data Privacy Act for the country. We have GDPR before that for the European region. With these the acts coming up fast and furious within various geographies, what is your take on it from a cybersecurity perspective?
Hi everyone. Firstly, I don't think Data Privacy Act is coming fast and furious at any point of time. It's already delayed by a long time, and I don't expect it to be there, frankly, before the next government spheres in, because it's referred to a committee. Committee is going to give a report. It's going to get tabled. Then it's a contentious issue, and whenever it will become an act, I'm pretty sure it will get challenged in a Supreme Court for some point or another. So it's going to take time. However, on data security, I would like to point out the third angle to the cyber security or any risk. First is obviously our system. Second is user. But there is a very, very, very important vulnerability which is hiding in plain sight, so to speak, which is third-party service providers. All our systems, no matter which system, they are run with third-party service providers. And I'm not talking about just about the big third-party service provider, which would be your software company. I'm talking about the people you will never think where data leakage may happen. All of us use, like, I'm in a lending sector. We use DSAs, channel partners. Insurance, they use agents or some other brokers, corporate agents. Now, these are also, in a way, a third party. They may or may not be a service provider. Now, we would have a good system of our own. I'm pretty sure all of us from the companies they come in, we have good cybersecurity systems. We can train our employees. But what about the third-party service provider? I think that's the biggest risk for which we are slowly waking in. When I see the risk models for many of the company, third-party or vendor risk is now getting much more talked about. It is being discussed in the risk management committee meetings. It is now something which is getting more into the legal agreement. I come from the legal side, which is being talked about. More responsibilities are now being put on the third-party service providers. And previously, a lot of information gets resided with these third-party service providers. So when an act comes, the major impact on the information aspect would be, even if a violation happened with a third-party service provider, the responsibility is going to lie on us. We can't claim that they were, maybe a third party and we cannot really be liable. So that's the one risk which I thought I'll sort of put into the forum.
Sure. Thanks for that, Yogesh, and thanks for bringing the third party and the supply chain into the picture. I will first ask Prakash if he has a separate view on the data privacy versus data security debate, and then we'll dive into the next question.
So if you see the privacy, it is an extended arm of security. When we were doing an API security testing, typically we see whether the API is authenticated or not, but we don't see what are the parameters that is passing request and response of the APIs. Typically I have seen one example, where a response has to be generated that whether the insurance policy has been generated or not. The response has to be yes or no. But in the response, we have seen that they are passing the complete details of the proposer or the customer. It is not required. But as per security, it will clear it. It will say that it is authenticated, is going in a secure channel, it is okay. But as far as privacy is concerned, we need to see whether this data is really required to be sent or not. Secondly is consent, which is typically talked about in privacy. Typically in Indian mindset, we always have a deemed consent kind of thing. We put if you see it, if you buy any product, if you buy any services, everything is mentioned in the terms and conditions, and just you have to put a checkbox. Because if you take a explicit consent, then the customer will read that paragraph. But typically what the organizations does is that, put all the conditions in the terms and conditions, and then, it's a just one single checkbox, and, you have given the consent. So that is, the consent management has to be, explicitly taken for the services, why it is taken, why the data is required, which data will be processed, how the data will be transmitted. The customer should be aware of at least basic things, not all the things, but why this data is really required.
So good points. So first and foremost, need to know rather than taking all information and all data as it comes. Second is explicit consent on what the data is for, why it is going to be used, how long it's going to be retained, rather than it being a deemed consent.
Actually, many banks and insurance companies have started recording calls to the customers. So we actually derive consent in the calls, and then we of course announce the calls are recorded. And this comes handy in the courts and ombudsman, etc.
As evidence. So that's one of the ways to operationalize the consent part of it. Yeah. So with that, Prashant, I'll come to you. Yogesh touched upon supply chain.
Yeah. Here I want to add what he told about third party risk. I want to share one experience. I have gone in Bombay to see the card data audit. That vendor is having the card data of all the banks. So all the banks in Bombay, means all banks are their headquarters in Bombay. Every bank's data is with that Mahape in the area, can't reveal the name of either the banks or the vendor. He is having all the data of all the banks. But most interestingly, one bank is so smart, the card data will be embossed with a software given by that bank. One bank, it's a new generation private sector bank, very big private sector bank, and that bank is a systemically important private sector bank also. That bank, I caught it. So though the data is in your customer's place, you can't tamper the data. So the bank can stop the processing with the software or something. So those kind of techniques, something have to be adopted to mitigate the third party risks, but that was carried out by only one bank. And we know in manufacturing sector, recently 1 year back, Maruti Suzuki or something, they had a compromise or something. They came to know that it was happened through one of their dealers. So third party risks are becoming so critical, and what he steps in, like Sunder knows, SOC 1, SOC 2, he's an expert in doing the audits and all global players. They say the third party vendor should also have the same security. What regulation is also there. Reserve Bank of India guidelines for their outsourcing policy so stringent and all. And the third party vendor also has to have the same security where you are there. Euro GDPR is also says the same thing. If you process your data with somebody, you have to have the same data. So third party risks are becoming so critical. Okay.
Sure. Thanks for that insight and that example, Satya. Prashant, I'll come to you with the same question. Globalization, interconnectivity of various systems and institutes, and with that comes the supply chain, the third party, your vendors, your partnerships. What is the best strategy to help to be able to keep all this together, to be able to mitigate the cybersecurity risk that comes up with this?
I think today, in the era of microservices, and the integration, everything is integrated. You cannot do everything at your own. You need to have partners with you to perform the particular activity fast. So the only way I feel is that, you need to continuously assess the security posture of the third party, and there is no other way to go. As you rightly mentioned, RBI recently come out with the third party outsourcing guidelines. The deadline by October, we need to implement it. Okay. So effectively, there are tools and mechanisms available that before onboarding the third party, you can see exactly what is the security posture of that third party. And based on that, you can onboard him. Secondly, regularly keeping an eye on him, how he's performing continuously, rather than, just at the time of only onboarding, if you see he's very good, and then if you keep quiet, things doesn't work that way. You need to regularly monitor him. And the way you are responsible for a lot of certain RBI to report the incidents, somewhere the clauses in our agreement plays a very major role. The third party also should be responsible to reporting of such incidents to us regularly. So unless and until they realize the importance of these incidents and the regulatory impact on us, it is going to be very difficult. So regularly assessing them is the only way you can do. And if possible, you need, as Mr. Sundar Krishnan was mentioning, the way we are trying to assess our controls by, breach attack simulations, we need to do a continuous attacks on our third party also to understand what is happening with them. That gives us the confidence to you.
Okay. So proper due diligence at the time of onboarding, watertight contracts so that we have all clauses covered, and periodic or regular audits reviewing of the performance. Thank you. And with that, I'll come to my final question. If you can maybe in 2 sentences tell me one thing that you would look at to create a cybersecurity, future-ready cybersecurity ecosystem for your respective organizations. Maybe 2 sentences, one.
Okay. So I will say that, go back to basics, have an inventory, do proper patching regularly, keep a visual on the, user behavior, and have an inventory of all the network and security devices, and typically thorough, vendor risk assessment.
Don't forget the basics. Thank you. Sunder.
I think to add to what he's saying, people, process, technology, tightening, and incident management response. I think that's going to be key.
Okay, so we're still sticking to the basics.
Okay, so one thing, because being a lawyer, I can't help but say no contract is watertight. Because at the end of the day, a contract is basically a compromise on which both parties have agreed upon. So there is always, and a good contract is one where both parties are disappointed. That's something which I would strongly believe in. So with respect to cybersecurity, quick answer, again, basics is always a thing. But one thing I would say is, which I've seen sometimes happening is, let's not be arrogant about our systems. I think though we do a lot of stuff with our system, we do a lot of things, we need to be very, very aware of the fact that it takes just one thing for an incident to be caused and our entire reputation and efforts to be cautioned into by almost everyone on the street. So
yeah. So arrogance sounds harsh. Let's not be overconfident.
Yeah, let's not be overconfident.
Yeah, Prashant.
No, I'll just simply say that you wear just attacker's hat and just look at the system to ensure that whether you are at best or not. Because doing continuously, checking your system at your own doesn't make sense. The attackers see always it differently. So we need to, see from his eyes how he is looking at us.
Outside in.
Yeah, to me, continuous cyber drills and customer awareness and your own employee awareness. Employee should be human is the weakest point. So continuous employee awareness creation is most important. And the other one is this micro segmentation or zero trust. They are telling zero trust is a solution. Even system also should not believe others. So zero trust implementation. Now in the threat landscape is increasing. Zero trust technology should be implemented to safeguard our interests.
Never trust anyone, always verify. Okay, and thanks a lot. Thank you all for your inputs and for your views and opinions. We may agree to some of them, we may disagree, but that's something that the audience has shared with and the panelists have shared with based on their experience. I've got about 2 minutes on the clock still. And so I will once again open it for Q&A. If there are any questions from anyone, you can just introduce yourselves. If you have it for a particular panel member, call out the panel member's name and ask your question.
Krishnan is here to answer all the questions. No.
Okay, so the silence, yeah, I think there's a question coming.
I am Prabhat from VSPAGI. So I have a question related to the consent management. I think one of the panelists, who's a lawyer also, right, had a very strong views on that. You see, my question is not about, whether it will come or not come. You see, that entire cybersecurity or what we are talking, entire panel discussion is talking about how secure we can make our system, right? Now the consent management had 2 parts. One is, the communication part, the promotional calls and message you send the customer. Other is the data privacy, that how strong your systems are, which is data is protected. So whether the regulation comes or not come, why can't we follow a or best practices of the world, which includes, let's say, GDPR compliance or CCPNA compliance. Why we are waiting for DPTP bills to come in? Why TRI is putting hard on all the enterprises to follow regulations? If we are so concerned about cybersecurity as an enterprise, we should, come up ourselves and follow these instructions without coming back to the regulation. No, to anyone.
I'll just take a try at it. First, sir, I would say that it's not as if consent management is not practiced in India, or that there are no laws with respect to consent management. Both the statements would not be right. First, there are several laws with respect to consent management. Information Technology Act is there, information technology rules are there. Then with respect to the particular field in which, like I have come from a regulated entity by RBI, so there are RBI regulation, IRDA has regulation, and SEBI and all, there are a lot. When there are, let's say, health hospitals and all, there are regulation with respect to the health ministry also. So there are regulations, sufficient regulation. And it is not right to say that consent management is not being followed. Consent management is being followed, but maybe not to the extent it could be followed. Now, should is a very tricky word, because what could be should for me may not be should for you. Second, with respect to whether we can, aspire to be at the same level where GDPR regulations put the emphasis on, or other regulations which you have talked about. First, we have to develop a regulation which is intrinsic to the society in which we live in. So, India, even today, is not a society where, let's say, there is much awareness with respect to the privacy, consent management. And I would say, sometimes we feel even the people, our customers, or the people with which we deal with, don't place as much importance on consent or on privacy as they probably should. So the regulation which we will evolve would have to be intrinsic to the society in which we live in. Having said that, I definitely aspire, and I think a lot of our progressive companies are already compliant to what would be at least 80% of what Privacy Act is going to bring. Because now we have a very good visibility on what it's going to bring in. So there may or may not be some surprises, but a broad idea is with everyone. And I think most of the companies have already built in their systems, or at least started their trainings, have done some kind of an analysis to understand what is required. Now, there will always be certain players who would not want to go by that approach. I think market is going to punish them, not just regulators. There is already a huge hue and cry about people who don't, who have their own views about privacy and about other such matters. So that is something which I think market and regulators will take a play in. But by and large, companies and especially responsible corporates are looking at it not as an obligation, but as a responsibility. That is my limited take on it.
Yeah, and just to add it, as you rightly mentioned, 80%, I'll say 90%. The only clause currently what most of the organization, or if the organization will not be following, is right to delete. Okay. Other than the protection of PII data, from third party, using it for the purpose. In fact, the fintechs, fintech wave has forced a lot of people to minimize the data so that the decision can be faster and use the data for the purpose. So I think other than deletion of data at the consent of customer is what is the missing mostly. Otherwise, most of the things are addressed by regulatory bodies, CERTIN and other IT Act.
With respect to deletion, there are regulations on KYC, which forces in a way companies to ensure that data is retained over and above a period of time. So that is a debate which I hope Privacy Act will also sort of tackle.
Well, Aadhaar, again, you're supposed to store only the last 4 digits. So there is a lot of audits that is happening to see Aadhaar is getting deleted in the systems. Although it's a very tough job.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.